Good afternoon, muy buenas tardes. Are you cold? Are you going to let the cold get you down? All right. My name is Ned Moore, and I am a leader with La Asamblea de Derechos Civiles, the Assembly for Civil Rights. And I'm here today as a moderator for our event. I'm also a member of Spirit of the Lakes Minnehaha United Church of Christ. To start off, as an organization of faith, we would like to introduce Kevin Cheney, who is the vicar for the Latino community. Kenny from the Latino community from the Church of Guadalupe.
Además de que es el vicario de nosotros.
Buenas tardes. We gather on this first day of May, springtime in Minnesota, to thank all that we have, but we need to keep remembering and keep asking for the right of our workers for an immigration reform here in this nation, because this nation was founded on peace, and we need to continue to work for that peace, that all of us who are from immigrant families, all of us who are immigrants, can continue to live in that freedom here in this country. So today we are gathered as a reminder to our officials and to all under God that today we live together as one family of humanity.
Ahora les presento al presidente de la Asamblea, Steven Renderos, que nos va a hablar sobre el propósito de la reunión de hoy. I'm going to introduce you to Steven Renderos, who's going to talk about the purpose for today's event and today's march.
I'm going to start out in English and then I'll do the same speech in Spanish. Voy a comenzar en inglés y voy a repetir lo que voy a decir en español. My name is Steven Renderos. I'm the president of La Asamblea de Derechos Civiles. We are here at the shadow of God's house to demonstrate together our words and our actions in a single purpose. We begin here at the cathedral because, as was stated by the Apostle Paul, we are a colony of heaven, one that does not distinguish between documented and undocumented, legal versus illegal. Over 150 years ago, a leader in this country recognized that a society half free, half slave could not fulfill the promise of democracy. That the institution known as slavery needed to be abolished in order for our human race to progress. I declare to you today that we are not a society where all men and women are free, but that all of us are slaves. To force a family into working for less than what's fair, that, brothers and sisters, is slavery. To deny a child an opportunity to continue their education because of the place of their birth, that is slavery. To hold thousands of people bondage for the crime of seeking a brighter future for themselves and their family, that is slavery. To hold the hearts and minds of people hostage through the broadcast of stories that label immigrants as illegal, that is slavery. And in the words of James Russell Lowell, they are slaves who fear to speak for the fallen and the weak. So in other words, our silence makes us slaves to our inaction. For over 30 years, immigrants in this country have waited for reforms to a system that continues to eradicate our institution of family. We have marched in St. Paul and in Minneapolis. From the downtown streets of Los Angeles to the halls of power in Washington, D.C. They are familiar with our chants, our signs, and our drum beats. In the meantime, the chains of injustice have only grown heavier. We ask for reforms to a system that profits from our bondage and benefits from our invisibility. We ask for reforms to a system that dehumanizes our existence and in some cases is looking to erase our existence altogether. We ask for rights from the very levers of power that have declared us less than human and therefore ineligible for rights. I declare to you today that today's march is not a plea for reform. It is a declaration of a new vision for the freedom and justice of immigrants. This new vision is emancipation, the historical struggle of oppressed people seeking their freedom from slavery. The time has come to march to a new drumbeat, one that leads us to act in conviction and not out of conformity. We march today because we understand what Dr. King meant when he said that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor, that it must be demanded by the oppressed. We whose chains have grown heavy, but whose strength and love has blossomed in this darkness, today are marching to a new drumbeat for the emancipation of immigrants and the people in struggle.
I'm Reverend Charles Graham from the Macedonia Baptist Church in Minneapolis. Though I have resisted getting involved in the political hysteria for most of my life, I feel that it's necessary for me to interject my wisdom, and I'm sure that the actions that are now being taken against people of color are not warranted. In fact, I know it is the wrong thing to do. Do you agree with me? Come on, act like you really agree with me. However, when this country had a need for help working in their fields and gardens and doing all kinds of manual labor, it was all right for people of color to assist. I remember and I have read how you have allowed crossing back and forth over the borderline as early as the 1800s, and when it was beneficial for this country, it was okay to do, amen? And as its consequences, people of color have been injured by judgments or actions that are directly or indirectly racist. Much of the attention for the past 20 years have focused in racist ways. So can institutions. Institutions can behave in ways that are overtly racist, especially excluding people of color from services, stopping them from doing and living their God-given rights and abilities in this country. They are inherently racist. Adopting policies that, while not specifically directed at excluding people of color, nevertheless, they result in their exclusion. Therefore, institutions can respond to people of color and whites differently. Institutional, nonetheless racist in outcome and not, if not in intent. Racism, a word that can mean a lot of things to many people. To some, the word is the description of a way of life. To others, it is a repulsive term that represents closed-mindedness. We want to open the minds of people so that people can see that all of us are people. In my own eyes, there are no blacks. In my own eyes, there are no Asians. In my own eyes, there are no whites and no Hispanics. There's only one race, the human race. No matter what our color, our future, our physical futures are, we are all the same. So let us join in this emancipation and see that it gets taken care of as quickly as possible. Amen? Amen? Amen?
Con Brad.
So we're going to continue with Brad Sapo, who is the administrator of Sagrado Corazón de Jesús.
Va a ver difícil seguir a Reverend Graham, pero voy a ver qué puedo hacer. Voy a primero hacerlo en inglés y después en español. Slavery is not a concept. Slavery is not a theory. Slavery is an action of oppression. Emancipation is not a theory. It is a method in which we correct an injustice by recognizing the humanity of those being oppressed. Slavery in its effect sounds like an ancient concept that has long since been overcome in this country. Many can tell you stories otherwise. Many of you can tell other stories, as did Reverend Graham. Those who have risked their lives to come here did not do so because there was a hole in the wall leading to the United States. They did so to make a better life for themselves and for their families. The dream of a better life in the United States soon met with the reality of a system that did not respect those new immigrants. It has been known for decades that those who immigrated here without documents were working under difficult conditions and very often abused and underpaid. Officials turned their backs and allowed these conditions to worsen and the people to struggle without rights and privileges of citizens of this country who were benefiting from their work. This is the new slavery, the allowing of an oppressive system that benefits from their labor and takes advantage of those workers through denying their civil and human rights. Why do we need to push for emancipation now? Because the threat to the undocumented and their families, whether undocumented or not, is rising. This government's policymakers, senators, representatives, governors, and even the president cannot or are not willing to dedicate the time to resolve this problem. Instead, they are starting to militarize the response. There are more incidents of immigration arrests in the homes of members of our community. For those who are undocumented and for their children, many of whom are citizens born in this country, this is becoming a police state. The official response is to dehumanize the undocumented so that they can enforce an unjust law. Their tactics are now getting more extreme, and the need for this to end is now. Do you want this to end now? We need to rehumanize what has been lost, forgotten, or just ignored in this struggle. And that is that those who are suffering this injustice deserve to be treated with dignity. There needs to be a common understanding that freedom, liberty, and to be treated with dignity are human rights. They are not constructs of those who demand them through wealth, power, and privilege, but they are divine rights given by God. There is a fear that if the undocumented are granted equality through emancipation, that there will be less freedom for those who are citizens of the United States. They do not understand the basic idea of freedom. The more that are free, the more freedom there is. If we, through our laws, restrict those basic rights of freedom and humanity, we become less free, less humane. Let your voice be the voice of freedom and liberation for emancipation. I am especially speaking to citizens and voters of this country. This inhumanity needs to stop, and it needs to stop now.
So we're going to begin our march over to Pharaoh's house. We're going to go to Pharaoh's house to demand emancipation. Before we do that, we're just going to send you off with a blessing from Father Kevin.
May God continue to bless us and guide us, the God who guides those who are in the shadows, those who are often forgotten. Let God take us to new places today and forever. Que Dios nos guíe siempre a los nuevos caminos hoy y para siempre. Amén.